Yeah, by and large, my work falls into a context of a kind of an organic construct, dealing with complexity and cause and effect and interrelationship of forms. To me, it's a very natural dimension of just my own physical nature. I mean, you walk, you balance, you respond to light and shade. When you go down a street, images change and alter. And in many ways, what I experience physically as moving through space, which basically sculpture is moving through space, biologically, me moving through space with gesture and balance and motion, I think those sensibilities are kind of fundamental to what the sculpture is about. Also, I mean, it's biologic, but also if you think of how the mind functions, one image kind of dissolves into another image. One thought pattern, you might, come to your consciousness, it'll mutate. So there's this continual evolution, redefinition, and it's a very fluid state. In many ways, many people say to my work, well, it seems very alive, it seems very active. Actually, it's made out of steel, which is inorganic. It's a stagnant form. But because I use gesture and kind of organic line, that people are responding to motion, and things that they respond to are more within natural realm, the aspect of gravity, the dynamism of motion. And when you deal with motion, you deal with progression, you deal with sequencing, you deal with extending into time, extending into perception, extending into memory, so it's back and forth and in and out. So that's the kind of vitality that people kind of experience, and I think that they plug in with their own sense of what it means to be alive, that we're engaged in this ephemeral passage. Our thoughts and feelings change all the time. They're not static. And for me, that dynamism, which means basically being alive, that those sensibilities are engaged into the development of the work. I mean, it's part of the process. You pick the steel up, you heat it, you bend it, you move it, you weld it, and it's the sculpture is actually a record of those activities. And in many ways, if you look at the sculpture as, say, like a Muybridge photograph, that you're dealing with motion and it's a given point in time. I think that the common perception of steel is that it's an industrial, it's inorganic, maybe responds to structural application, even kind of a militaristic, anti-human kind of position. However, there's another aspect of iron and steel, and that is that of the organic. The way I deal with the work, for a better term, it's kind of more, well, it's organic, but it's more poetic, that it deals with motion and gesture and things that seem more compatible to the human condition. So when confronted with a work that they know, they understand a certain aspect of steel, yet they're experiencing something that's diametrically opposed to what they believe, that it's something that's submissive, that's organic, that it's responsive, that it has a sense of vitality and life to it. And how do you put those two sensibilities together? The only way you can put it together is through paradox, that you understand one thing, yet you experience something that's diametrically opposed, and that the aspect of paradox is what brings it together. And if you see something that appears to be moving and is not moving, what you're actually doing is you are projecting an individual's perception at another point in time, and you're creating a situation of expectation or apprehension, because what they're really experiencing is something beyond what they're really seeing. One of the things that I deal with quite a bit with my work is the act of passage. It's not just perceptually engaging the work and trying to deal with the visual dialogue, but literally a lot of the sculpture is opened up so you walk through it. So there's this very, I mean, it could be tactile, but there's this real engaging of that experience. And what happens is when you see a form, you might see it from a distance, it has a certain profile, a certain activity, you understand it. As you walk closer, there's more details that you see, you get a different experience, but it's still this object there, and the object just gets bigger and bigger as you approach it. By having the sculpture open and you walk through, all of a sudden you walk into a different reality. In many ways, it's like if you're out in the landscape, what you're experiencing, and then when you walk into a building, what you experience. You as a physical person are still the same, but your perception changes. And this active passage, I've done several gates and ceremonial archways, and it's a point of remembrance, it's a point of experience, it's a place one goes for a certain sensibility. It could be very non-literal, it could just be a sheltering thing. It could be when you're in the sculpture and there's sunlight on the outside, you're in this very graphic kind of Rorschach situation. And if you think of how we think, that when obviously we live in the eternal present, but you think about the future, you think about the past, we learn from the past to hopefully direct what we do in the future. And that whole thing of back and forth and in and out, it's like almost that the gateway is the present and the gateway is the fulcrum. And in many ways, that entranceway, serves as a metaphor. This is a gross generality, but I'd say there's two different ways an individual's work. One individual might have an intellectual or a philosophical philosophy they live their life by. So based on that philosophy and based on that perception, they develop a design theory that articulates that. And so it comes from that base. The other extreme to that is something that's more emotional based or more intuitive. My work is pretty much from kind of an emotional based situation, and the whole process I'm involved in is more of an intuitive one. Now, the actual process of conceiving the work, for me, isn't seeing a visual image. For me, it's a kind of an emotional place that, say for instance, if I'm looking at a site or I'm conceiving a work and a feeling will come to me, whether it'll be, solemnity or energy or compactness or whatever it might be. And being an emotional feeling, it's invisible. It doesn't have visual form. It might have a density, it might have a lightness, it might have an openness, a certain type of thing. And from that, the work comes. I keep on making reference to music, but for instance, say jazz, there's a certain angst or a certain feeling one has, you engage in that, and then from that, the feeling is articulated through either a scale or through what I do with dealing with form. If I'm dealing with a small work or a work, say an exhibition piece that's not for a client, I just want to deal with a relationship of form or whatever that might be, I directly go into the studio. I might do drawings, but I work directly with the material. They're more like studies. In dealing with large-scale work, you don't have the flexibility to do that. That the idea has to be pretty well thought out. The structural engineering, dealing with the client and all of that has to be well resolved. So after understanding the scope of what the project is, say for instance, what the architectural site might be, what the profile of that institution might be, what I feel might be appropriate, whatever kind of research has to go into that. After I have that information, I just start with drawing, and very, very loose conceptual drawings. It might be, scale, balance, is it linear, is it dense, is it compact, is it expansive, whatever. And probably I go through, 200 or 300 drawings. It sounds excessive, but they're very, very fast. So from those drawings, I select out an approach that I feel that might be important or something that I'm excited about. Then I'll go to cardboard models, just cutting out cardboard or paper, trying to, because drawings flat, and most of my work is three-dimensional. So the maquettes are done in cardboard to explain the three-dimensional nature and also the structural integrity of the work. So that resolves the forms three-dimensionally, and then from there there's probably 2 or 3 stages. From the initial model, a more exacting model is made, and then finally it goes to a metal model. And that becomes the basis for, one, the resolution of the idea, but also to bring that to the client, and then also like the structural engineering that has to be done, and all of that is done based on. In my studio, I just don't execute one project and then go to another. We usually have many of them going on simultaneously. So that breaks up into 2 kind of separate disciplines. One is the kind of the creative focus, for a better term, of making the right decisions at a given point in time on a project. And then also there is the kind of the pragmatic logistical concerns of having my people and finances and timelines and scheduling and all put together. So as far as the mind state that puts me in, it's a better way to explain it. It's kind of like a kaleidoscope, that you have all these variables that just change and mutate all the time. A decision that one might make at a given point in time might not necessarily be the right decision at another point in time. So the one thing that I found that is kind of a discipline that's was difficult to achieve is that, say there's a project that's extending over a couple of year period of time, which is normal on a large project. And as I had mentioned before, that my basis for design is more kind of emotional, intuitive based rather than an intellectual kind of construct. So for me, when a decision has to be made at a given point in time on a project, I have to get back to that place kind of emotionally, so the answer comes out of that ambiance, and to make a pertinent decision at that time. So then if in a given day that I might be working on 5 or 6 different projects, when I shift to another project, it's a whole different set of variables. So that kind of emotional balance, as you were, is a kind of a discipline to get into that headspace to be able to make the appropriate decisions. So that's one aspect. The other is just very, very pragmatic. I do have a studio manager, a foreman, and a project manager that helps on the logistics and the structure. There's time allocation, there's public relations aspect with each project. There's material, cash flow, all of that type of thing. In many aspects, it's more kind of akin to the disciplines that an architect might have in dealing with subcontractors and timelines and schedules and all of that. So you put the overlay of creativity on that, which, I mean, architects, obviously, it's a creative discipline, but for a sculptor, it's just different concerns. I try to keep an amount of time for exhibition work. With exhibition work, for me, is more dealing with exploration without the constraints of a given commission. And so each one becomes a journey as such. I want to deal with an aspect of form development. I want to deal with an aspect of structure. I want to deal with an aspect of contrasting color or texture or whatever. And I isolate each one of these kind of points of investigation in a piece. So when you see the exhibition pieces, one piece will be radically different from the other. And it just allows me to experience and explore different realities. See, the other thing too is the way the work is developed, it has gotten larger in scale. One, to really embrace and experience scale a lot larger, but there's a lot of research or evaluation that has to happen before you commit to a larger piece. And these exhibition pieces give you the foundation, the position, and the confidence to project oneself into that dimension. One thing that I've always been concerned with, and this is something I guess is germane to my work, is the aspect of clarity, clarity of form. And even though these pieces are organic and they intertwine with one another and they wrap around or whatever, there's a clarity of line, there's a clarity of transition, there's a clarity there. And for me, that's just part of my makeup. I mean, if there's a line that stops and starts, and how does it stop and how does it start, and how is a curve articulated, how does motion dissipate, all these things, by putting clarity to the form, that it just it's kind of a heightened reality. It's interesting. I was driving. It was one night. It was raining. I was with some people driving down the street, and we saw the electric lines were kind of draped, and the water was on there, and the moonlight was hitting the wires, and it was just incredibly beautiful. I mean, this silver line just going into the darkness, and I was just mesmerized by it. I mean, it was incredible. I'd never seen anything like it in my life, the same as if you see the... So anyhow, I had mentioned this to the people in the car, and they were non-art related. And they didn't even see it. I mean, water on a wire, what, you know, it had no value, it had no reason, it had no whatever. And they looked at it and they thought it was interesting, I guess, because I pointed it out to them, but they never would have seen it. If anything, that's kind of the aristocracy of the artist, because you have profound richness of being alive that a lot of times people are blinded by whatever. You know, it's really strange that my wife is an artist as well, and has trained for many years, and we'll be driving down the street, let's say in Carmel, and there's trees and flowers, and you know, I mean, it's just a whole bunch of things going on. And so I'll see this tree branch coming out with just a certain very particular kind of quality about it. It would just be part of the texture. And I would see that it would be quite amazing. And I'd literally be taking breath in so I could talk to say, Frances, do you see that branch? And she'll say, look at that branch. I mean, it's amazing. Truly, and that happens all the time, which is amazing.